ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ 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 ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ.
So wonderful, Inni. So excellent to meet you. And you've just told me about all your travels, and you've had a life which has been so diverse. And I was saying to you that diversity and creativity are often very much linked. And you said it helps you to be sensitive. And we're talking about symbology, and you'll know why I've kind of like waited to just ask you the question, because you started to explain to me about how you've become sensitive to people. But let's relate it to the symbology that we're talking about. And the first thing that I wanted to talk about was kinship and humanitarianism. So if we look at the first symbol, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, that can, because it's Singh, and we use the terms, we use the titles Kaur and Singh, and so that can make us feel as though we're part of the same family. You were born in Kuwait and I was born in the Punjab, but your surname is Kaur and my surname is Kaur. And so in a sense, that kind of makes, we could even be cousins, you know, we share the same heritage, we share similar kind of traditions. And so the Singh and Kaur title enables this kind of instinctual relatedness with each other. But as you know, Maharaja Ranjit Singh, he didn't govern just over the Sikhs, he governed from Lahore, the whole of Punjab. He governed over Muslims, Christians, Hindus, and Sikhs. So he wasn't restricted by his kinship, that he was only going to be raising the profile of people that were similar to him. And then the third symbol we've got of Sri Hargobind Sahib, sixth Guru Hargobind Singh Ji. Well, he wasn't Singh, it's Hargobind Ji at that time, because it was Guru Gobind Singh that introduced the Singh titles. And he negotiated the release from prison of 52 Rajas who were not Sikhs, they were Hindu Rajas, and it was irrelevant to him whether they were the same as him or different from him. These were people that had been imprisoned unjustly, and therefore his humanitarianism extended to all. And then, of course, in the middle, we've got the symbol of Ek Onkar, which is symbolic of oneness and this interrelatedness. And you were born in one country and raised in another, and you've traveled to so many different places. So wherever you've been sensitive to the people around you. How has this concept of oneness and also kinship played a part in your life? Have you looked for other people that were similar to you through your professional values, or was it through different kinds of values? What is it that, how do you juxtaposition these two concepts of kinship and oneness in your life?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I don't think I've ever thought about it in that structured way. It is just who you are. So, you know, if I look about kinship and associating with Maharaja Ranjit Singh, I mean, I was not born and raised in India, right? Yet there is an identity, there is a calling to know that you're associated with Punjab. I've been to Punjab only once for 3 days, but yet the land calls. There's a beckoning for the land, because that's that shared history that we are all part of, and we feel very strongly about. So when I take that, and I don't necessarily, wherever I've lived, looked for a Singh or a Kaur. What I've looked for is a Gurdwara, you know, to go there. And if a friendship develops because of the person itself, of we are like-minded or whatever, well and good. But my association that I seek those individuals, I would not say that was my calling, or that's the way I operate. It's more so the values, what that person emanates and radiates, and if they are in line with what I believe in, the friendship develops. But definitely the Singh and Kaur has a powerful image, but I also smile because it was last week I was out of town, and we were walking in a different area, and I was with a group of people who, you know, on a walking tour of the area, and we passed by a gas station, and I saw a Sardar there. So I just raised my hands and did this, and he, you know, from a distance did this, and everyone looked at me and they said, "Do you know him?" I said, "No, I don't, but I know he is. We share the same love." And it was interesting that the conversation then went, what is this love and who is this love? But there is, I guess, in maybe in a word, there is an identity, there is a kinship like that. So you talk about now the humanitarianism. It is actually the belief, the strong belief in that we are part of the same jyot, sab mein jyot, jyot hai soe. So if that fundamental principle is, I adhere to that. And hence when you are traveling and when you are particularly, it gets expanded and, you know, it gets reinforced in the different countries, because I wasn't there as a traveler. I was there as a person who had lived there for more than 2 years. So when you live in a place, you absorb the culture, and as you do that, you say there isn't any difference. We want the same things. We cry at funerals. We celebrate at weddings. If our child doesn't do well in school, the pains are the same. And so that oneness is really the fundamental principle of Sikhi, which I embody, and I look for that. So those two are very much part of my life. I don't know if that answers the question. It's gone about in a roundabout way.
Yeah, I love the metaphor of Sab mein jyot. That there's that concept of like light embraces everyone unconditionally, doesn't it?
Right. But the next part is actually equally important, which I found to be probably so striking, that Jyot hai soe, that light is the same. Mm-hmm. So, that even that slightest negation that you have, that there is a difference, that what Guru has shared is there isn't. These are superficial differences that we have created, but basically we as human beings are actually one.
And when you think about energy,
mm-hmm.
Like the energy in one person and the energy in the other, how can you say that energy is different? You might have less energy, you might have more energy, but essentially, the essence of that energy, they say like energy can't be destroyed, it just simply transforms. And so you may have exuberant energy, but the core essence of energy is energy, isn't it?
Right.
Same as with sound, you can make different tunes with that sound, so you can say this is one tune, this is another tune, but they all tunes arise from sound, and at the level of sound.
Right. And the better the musician, the more skilled the musician, the sound is greater and with greater perfection. Mm-hmm. But the underlying fact is the sound. So the energy also is the same. However, some exuberate this magnetic energy and some exuberate a dark energy, mm-hmm. but the energy is the same.
Yeah, energy is energy. And it's interesting you talk about living in diverse places. Most of my life, from the age of 6, I've always lived in places where either I was the only Sikh in the place, or there were very few. And I went to school where there was only one other Sikh girl, and I worked in organizations where, like, maybe I had 1, maximum 2 Sikh friends, in organizations that employed thousands of people. But as long as there was a Gurdwara close enough that I could go and connect with, like, that feeling of belongingness, and that was enough. Even though at the Gurdwara I didn't speak with anyone, because I lived in London, and in London you go to the Gurdwara and most people don't know who you are because there's so many people there. And so when you go to the Gurdwara, even though you may not have a conversation with anyone, there's still that feeling of connectedness, because everyone looks like you. They eat, you know, with you, and so it feels as though you're with family even though you're not talking with anyone there, you know. So we can communicate even without talking, can't we, with people that we feel a kinship with.
Well, it's part of it is like a feeling of coming home. It's sound, because in the Gurdwara, the sight, the sound, and the smells are very familiar. And so it's that familiarity that draws you, and you let down your guard and makes you comfortable.
And in the same way that when we go home, we don't necessarily need to explain anything. We can just be who we are. That's the kind of feeling.
You just show up, right?
You just show up. That's right.
Yeah.
So in terms of leadership, we need to have that. We need to have that sense of belonging and that sense of kinship, that sense of like not having to pretend about who we are, not having to put up a facade. It's just being who we are. And then at the other end, it's like embracing all the diversity around us as well, feeling connected with that as well, being one within those spaces of diversity as well. That can require a bit more skill, because I think it's easy to feel kind of comfortable with people who are familiar to us. Sometimes it can take a little bit more effort to feel just as comfortable with those who are not the same.
Oh, it requires a lot more effort. It also requires a lot of explanation. It requires a lot of soul searching. And if I may use that word, it's an internal thinking, because, you know, sometimes the values which you fundamentally believe in, and they are your core values, may not line up with the organization you're in or in the company you're in. And that's where the clash comes. And that's when I say you go within and say, is this really what I want to be in this place? And then if you believe that, then it's actually the onus is on you, on me, that if I value where I am, then it is up to me to explain what values I hold dear and willing to fight for, and willing to have the leadership in that organization look at them, and maybe if they cannot embrace them, but at least honor them and understand where I'm coming from. So that's where the challenge of when people who are value-centered, not necessarily leadership-centered, value-centered, when they enter organizations, how they maneuver and how they position themselves, because it's very easy to walk out. I don't believe in these values, right? It's a lot more work to explain your position and say why this is not, it's contrary to what I'm thinking. So if you look at the ad dollars that are spent in advertisement, are we promoting the right thing? Is this conscionable? And this is where you bring in your values. If this product is going to harm the greater good, do I really need to be putting my energy in here? Do I need to be putting my brain power in promoting this? So those are those ethical questions and values that, questions that come up when you are in a boardroom, when you are in a meeting where the marketing people say, well, we want this much influence and we want to create an ad that is going to, regardless whether it's negative or positive, but the negative ads always do, the controversial ads always get more. Are we willing to do that? And then you have to understand what it is really. Is that what you want to do? That's where the struggle comes in.
And reminds me of the principle of Kirth Kamal, righteous living. Do we want to invest our time and energy into unethical work? Is it going to?
Today's Hukam from Darbar Sahib, it really struck me. Guru Nanak Sahib says in Rag Ramkali, he says, "O Pandit, what are you sharing? Why are you sharing information?" I'm paraphrasing. Why are you sharing information that is causing entanglements, putting people in causing tension? Why don't you share the information, write. He said, write about the one, the earth cherisher, the one who is the charmer. Write about those virtues. So the onus really is, the Guru is asking us to think, what is it that is flowing from our hands? And if it's not that, then everything else becomes secondary. So if that's your focus, obviously there's going to be tension, but that's who you are. And you bring that, so you say it in a different way. Is this for the greater good? Is this where the company wants to be known for? And that's how you maneuver the leadership angle. But it is by no means easy. I can tell you it is a constant, I don't want to call it a battle, but it's be constantly on high alert. Mm-hmm. Because it's something you hold so dear. And obviously we make mistakes and obviously we slip, but at least consciously not to be making those is where I think what we can aspire for, at least that's what I aspire for.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So let me ask you about another aspect of leadership, which symbolically, so first of all, the first image is Langar and Seva. So symbolically, Guru Nanak Dev Ji created this disruption to the social order of those times, because to sit and eat with people that were of a different caste was a revolutionary act. It was a very disruptive and very radical behavior, to sit and eat using the same utensils as everyone else. And so that is symbolically, we still we know that it's about equality. We know it's like sitting on the floor with everyone and sharing meals together. It's about humility as well. It's about humility and just again, that kinship as well, kinship with people regardless of their rank, regardless of their status and whatever. And then the second one, Guru Gobind Singh Ji, in those times, it was not allowed for it was only allowed for the rulers to ride on horses, and you couldn't ride on a horse if you were from the lower caste. You would be punished for doing that. So he allowed all his followers to ride on horses. So that also was a radical act of defiance, but disrupting the social order and allowing people to rise above their station, as it were. And then we've got Mai Bhago, who led the 40 defectors from Guru Gobind Singh Ji's from when they were trapped in the fort, and they fled, and she led them back into battle. So here you have a woman rising above her station. That was not, it still isn't, in a way, like we still have these inequalities, but she symbolizes somebody who broke through those traditions and transformed, the existing social hierarchy, in that act of defiance. So here we've got leadership where, on one hand, we know that it's important to advocate egalitarianism, and at the other end, we've got, we're rising, we're aspiring to be rulers and to be free. The falcon representing freedom and visionary leadership. And so we've got these two contrasting principles, haven't we? These contrasting concepts of egalitarianism and at the same time being ambitious and rising above our station, not allowing society to kind of keep us contained in the small boxes that kind of fit in with the status quo. What are your thoughts on this?
So, I mean, while you were speaking, the thought that came to mind was servant leadership, right? So that was there, but it is and I go back to the principle of the oneness, because sit with someone who is of a different social, economic, and political status than you is very powerful. And it goes back to the principle of oneness, ek onkar. That is because of that, that was a fundamental principle. And that's where Guru Nanak Sahib expanded that into the Langar. I think the most radical thing for on Dasbeh Pacha, Guru Gobind Singh Sahib, what we did was by giving the name Singh and Kaur, and just absolutely creating everyone, that we are one. And then also that the Khalsa will be sovereign. Singh and Kaur is sovereign. So that sovereignty is paramount to everything that is part of us. And as for my Pago, it's interesting that, yes, she, her life is very interesting. And I don't think she thought anything about, and I could be wrong, that she was doing anything radical. It was, honestly, she was a Sikh of the Guru. And while we love to say that we are Kaurs, and I have said this before, and how dear and important it is for us, and some of us, like me, have gone through great challenges to be worthy to even be called Kaur, and we've paid a price for it. I've paid a price for it. But at the end of the day, I think for me, I can speak for myself. All I would want to do is that, that she was a Sikh of the Guru, regardless of the gender. So while we rise from these stations, and this is what, that we are energy and we believe in that. So even to rise from the body and the spheres of gender, that binding thing, is actually breaking the social order and the norm. So while we look at, the social, economic, political, that is one box that you break. Then you encompass a whole lot of what sovereign is. And that is, you're not bound to anyone except to a Akal Purakh, right? And then the third one is, the hardest one, I think, is probably the gender. When you say, it doesn't really matter who I am, whether I'm a man or a woman, it's I belong to the Guru. And the Guru, and I want to be associated with that.
And I suppose it was her loyalty, commitment, the power, the energy created by that bond of faith. And that's what broke through.
Yes, that is what broke through. It is not that she was a woman. It was the way she was raised, by her father. She was there in the Anandpur Sahib on 1699. She took Amrit there. Mm-hmm. So her life, actually to study her life, is incredible. And it didn't just her life didn't end with just that moment. What she went on to do, and this is a woman, an ordinary woman, who has a Gurdwara named after her. Think how powerful that is. And by the people, by the Sangat. So there was something quite special about this woman. And it was, what was it? It was her faith. So when we don't honor a man, or we don't honor a woman, at least I hope we don't do that. We honor the faith, their commitment to the faith, and what they did for the faith, regardless of their gender.
Yes. Where is the Gurdwara for my Bago?
I don't want to say the wrong thing, but there is, if you Google it, and you will see also there, her weapons are there. And so she was a very strong, big woman. And I know so much about her is because I spoke about her. So I did the research, and I had the team, at the Sikh Research Institute do the work for me and did the research on her background, her family background and everything. And that's why when we talk about her, I would love for us to study her in totality, because that life is a life. Yes, that moment is one, and I'm not taking it away from her, but there's much more. The grandeur of that moment, you can understand what led to that, where she got the strength, and then what all then she went on to accomplish, because that's incredible in itself.
That is very powerful. Yes, I haven't read very much apart from, like, I've got a little book, but the little book on my Bago it's written for children, I think.
We haven't really done justice to her, to really, in today's day and age, to really understand. I mean, to me, the fact that after Pacha leaves this earthly realm, she continues on. And how the Sangat then, she goes where she stays to her back to her village and how this Gurdwara is named. Yes.
Just to prove that I have got a book on her, but it is, yeah, as I say, it does look as though it's written for children. It's, yeah, I mean, it's...
and it probably just ends at that stage, right? At the 40? Or does it go on to the end of it?
It's got like fill in the blanks. So,
maybe I need to write a book on her.
Yes, that would be a very good idea. Yeah, that would be a very good idea. So let me talk about the third three symbols that I have got to discuss. Let's see what your thoughts are on these. So here we have got Gurmukhi. Yeah. We've got the Nishan Sahib and we've got the Khanda. So Gurmukhi, as you know, it was created for us by our gurus and based on the existing script. And for me, in terms of leadership, this is an example of innovation because they didn't use the existing scripts. They could have used Arabic, they could have used Sanskrit, they could have used Farsi, but they didn't. They created a new script for the, to transcribe the Gurbani. And so that innovation, it's like creating something from nothing, adapting something that exists to modifying it so that more and more people can read the Gurbani for themselves without an intermediary, and also to become literate, and then we've got the Nishan Sahib, which wherever we go, if we see a Gurdwara, we usually see a raised Nishan Sahib, and so that there's that concept of ownership there, that we do have the right to raise the Nishan Sahib in spaces that we are claiming for our Sikhi values and the right to worship in the way that we want to worship. And the Khanda representing activism, it's like Miri Biri and being righteous, fighting for justice and fairness and equality and the values. So what are your thoughts on Gurmukhi and the Nishan Sahib and the Khanda, like in terms of innovation, in terms of activism and leadership?
Actually, when you put this up and I was here listening, the word that comes to mind is sovereign. The Guru created a sovereign people. A sovereign nation has its own language, has its own symbolisms, right? And it has its own flag, and it has its own way of identifying with activism.
It's like a shield almost, isn't
it? It's exactly. I mean, I looked at this and this is, the way I love the slide, the way you put it up, because it's so clear. What did the Guru, and that's the whole idea, that you are sovereign people. To create a language that was no longer the language of the elite, which is you didn't need Sanskrit, right? You had to be a Brahmin to be able to study or to speak that.
Yeah, they wouldn't let some castes read the Shastras. Yeah,
right. And then you had the Arabic, the Urdu. So here, what they created was the language of the common people. So the ordinary individual could rise and claim their sovereignty. And we are a sovereign people, and hence I looked at all three things of symbolisms of sovereignty. Of when you break away from the existing structure and say, no, our text is different, which is the Bani, the Guru Granth Sahib. Our language, the written word which is written in, is also different. It's not held by anything else. Mm-hmm. And yes, in our places of learning, which I will call the Gurdwara, we will identify this place as being sovereign. It belongs to all six. It doesn't belong to any one person. I mean, that's vastness and that's sovereignty. That's how I look at it. Mm-hmm. And the Gurus, the creativity is part of us. Karta, the doer, the creator is within you. So the creativity is within you, and how you manifest it, how every individual manifests it, comes out in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So with leadership, empathy, a lot of leadership, well, any leadership that is going to be effective in the long run there needs to be empathy. Yes. And we talked about kinship and we talked about altruism in terms of Har Gobind Singh and the martyrs. His father, Guru Arjan Dev, he was martyred, wasn't he? And Guru
Yes.
Tegh Bahadur was martyred. And they were protecting the rights of others, not themselves. And so there's a lot of, so altruism is associated with leadership as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You can't be a leader if you're not compassionate,
Mm.
if you don't show the empathy, right? And to rise above. Those leaders, you can't. So there is a thing, we have a saying is, don't be a leader who's walking so ahead that when you look back, you cannot see the people, your followers.
Mm-hmm.
So be a leader who's just 5 or 6 steps ahead so that they bring along everyone with them. So that's what is the type of leadership you want? What is the type of leader that you want to be? That's the question. What is the leadership that you aspire to be? The one who's out there right in front, the first person on the battlefield, but the troops are really behind and they haven't got, that is suicide.
Mm.
That's not leadership. That is, if anything, egotistic.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm not taking away the bravery, but I'm just saying that leadership without compassion, without understanding where your people are and what needs to move them. And so therefore, if you need to walk 2 steps slower, so be it. That's the leadership.
Yeah. And you see, when we talk about leadership, we can see the leadership in our own families.
Yes.
Leadership begins from the family level, and then we can take that, those skills into the organizations. And I find that even in families where there is a lack of empathy, that's when families break down, because you may have like the following generation who do things in a very different way to the previous generation. And if they stop empathizing with the other, if the younger person, stops empathizing with the needs of the older, and the older person stops empathizing with the need to adapt for the young person, there's the leadership breaks down.
Absolutely. It's actually taking the time to listen and understand where the other person is coming from. I think probably, when I didn't appreciate my mother until I had my first child.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I realized, there was no question, I loved my mother, but a deeper level of appreciation of what it took. I appreciated then my grandmother on her journey, what she went through. And events in your life come about where you gain these insights, and the empathy is also it's hard for people who it's something that needs to be cultivated. It doesn't happen automatically. It's something that needs to be worked on and to be at a conscious level, because otherwise we end up in our silos without really communicating and talking. So as much as we say that the elders, forgive me, that they have no value. Actually, they have the most value, because the stories that they tell and what they've been through, they are really the groundings for us to take and then appreciate that, understand where we're coming from, know who we are, and then continue. If you don't know your past, you don't know what your families and your legacy, your communities have gone through, you will never be complete.
And in the same vein, the older person needs to know their future as well.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why they invest. And that's why they say, they bite their tongue, that it wasn't the way. My grandmother, at the age when I turned 16, she thought I was never going to be married, because the girls in her family were married at 13 and 14. Right? So my father, but I understood that much later, where she was coming. They're coming from a place of fear. They're coming from a place of love, but a fearful love, because that's all what they've grown, they are used to. That's their world. But the world has changed so dramatically. and to bring them closer to this, for that understanding is that communication, that back and forth, and the empathy to be able to listen.
And in the organization, when we're surrounded by people who have very different values to ourselves, who have very different life experiences, again, we need to cultivate that empathy, because you were fortunate to have the experience of having a child and you empathized with your mother perhaps more, but in the organization, we're never going to live the lives of other people. We're like, I used to work a lot with refugees, for example, and I hopefully won't ever have the experience that they had, but I had to learn to see things from a totally different perspective, based on an imagination, I suppose, of what they had been through.
I think if you look into any person who's coming, who was in that dire state as a refugee when they've lost everything, we can associate with losing, what it is, loss. But the empathy, even with your fellow workers, it is, the empathy of really taking the time. Why are they acting this way? Why are they saying this? And if we just step back and maybe just dare to ask or delve into their family life or something, the answer always lies there. They are who they are because of the circumstances they are in. Sometimes a worker is really tough and harsh, and when you break down and you ask and you think, and they say, well, I've been hurt so many times, I'm not going to make any friends there. In my last job, I was treated badly when I was friendly to everyone.
And the thing is, that kind of person with that kind of thinking will never be elevated to leadership position. We have to get rid of that kind of thinking very, very quickly, don't we?
Yeah, but if the leadership recognizes that, then they invest. So leadership is actually investing in the people, knowing their skill set, and recognizing, are they the right fit for the organization? And if they think that they are right fit for the organization, then to give them the tools, the education, whatever is needed for them to grow. Because part of leadership, a very part of leadership is actually empowering you to your fullest capacity. Because that benefits everybody.
That's right. Building the confidence, building the self-esteem, and elevating people. Like, a lot of leadership, it comes through sponsorship, not simply through coaching and mentoring, but active sponsorship, where there is somebody in the organization or outside the organization who's willing to, they've got your back, as it were,
Yes.
And that's when, the whole concept of kinship and humanitarianism, it's like we can be very open and very kind of embracing of everyone, but the harder skill to develop is knowing how to become trusted, how to become trustworthy in the eyes of others who are very different to us, that they might not, sometimes you have to work for many years in an organization to get to that level of where everyone accepts you and trusts you, but to enter into an organization and to be seen as being, regardless of how you look and how you dress and what you eat, nevertheless, you can still be, you can still evoke that trust from others, in that you will be a good leader, that you're the best fit in terms of your interpersonal skills.
Right. It takes time. Leaders are not born overnight. They've paid their dues. And when you enter an organization, and if you are coming in as a leader, then you have to put your ear to the ground and listen very closely. And that's how you gain the trust and confidence, and everybody, starts to look up. Because a leader who comes in and starts dictating, that leadership is not going to last.
And then there are different strategies that people will use to become accepted, to fit in, to the organization rather than belong. I use those words deliberately, fit in rather than belong. And they will try to fit in by changing their names. Their name is different, and so they will shorten their name and make sure that their name is similar to the names of every other people around them. They will, maybe go to the pub when normally they wouldn't go to the pub, to become accepted. There are various strategies, and some of these strategies in the long run, they can be counterproductive because it's giving up so much of who you really are.
Well, it's becoming inauthentic. At the end of the day, a leader is known for their authenticity. And that's, so and these go down to the values. What is it that you really want? What is it that you can compromise and live with? Or, and then those are the things which I say that you yourself dig deep within and say, what is it truly that you want?
Well, the thing is, you see that, Gurmukhi, let's go back to Gurmukhi, for example. I only self-taught myself Gurmukhi. I only had 2 years of schooling in Gurmukhi. I can read and write letters, but I communicate in English, I write in English. And so that is, we can look at that as like, well, that's adaptation. That's the way the world is. And on the other hand, it's like, well, no, because I've given up so much of who I am because I can't read the novels that my father used to read in Punjabi at the moment. Sundari, one of my dreams is to read Sundari in Punjabi. I've only read the English translation of it.
And it's horrible.
The English translation
is horrible.
Well, you see, so that's something that I've given up, because of lack of time, I would say. And so that's the kind of thing that it seems like seemingly, well, it's unavoidable, but it kind of undermines your self-esteem in the long run, doesn't it?
Well, I went through the same journey. Okay, I taught myself Gurmukhi because at the age of 45, I taught myself, and I'm reading and writing, but it is because I thought it was valuable. I thought it enhanced me. There was a part of me that was incomplete if I didn't know that. So I agree, but the gurus communicated in multiple languages. So I use English because it's a far easier way to communicate with the people I need to communicate. But I also know that because I was short in this, I felt incomplete. And I needed to invest the time and do whatever I needed to feel that bit of it. So to me, that is not, it's actually really is, what is it that you want? And how do you want to, this memory of your father reading, it's a very dear memory. I feel it's a part of you that you're cherishing and missing, right? Yeah. Because as we get older, we associate more and more with the things our parents and grandparents did, because that's home. We're going back home. That's the place of comfort for us. We don't know any other comfort because now we are at these ages and say, oh, my grandfather would do this, my grandmother, and so we associate with that. Now our children will associate it what you and I are doing right now. So that level of comfort, effort, if you value it, if anyone values anything, and you can learn at any age, that's not the point, but any skills that, even to take up wood carving or to take up something which your family member did, and it now has become the sweet memory which you want to carry on through yourself so that you can pass it on. It's when those things start entering. And that's different kind of leadership, because in a family, if there's a skill set that is being lost and which you treasure, then you take it upon yourself to learn the skill set, and hopefully that it will go down some generation in the family. but you've identified it. Yeah, it's important to you. It's important to us. I mean, this learning the language was important to me, so therefore that investment was made. But and that's what we think about, that leadership only has to be at the corporate level or the business level. It isn't. It actually is in day-to-day life, which you said so beautifully, that leadership begins at home. And this is the leadership, what you and I are just talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah, brilliant. So, Inni, thank you so much for your time. That was a wonderful conversation. I hope to find out more and more about the work that you do with Seek Research Centre.
Yes, Tech Research Institute, yes.
Wonderful. Yes, thank you very much for the work that
you do. Thank you for having me, and thank you for these wonderful questions and a lovely time spent with you. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Wow.